Fly Fisheries and Parks for a budget hearing. We have from 2 o'clock to 2:30 today, so we have a lot of stuff to go through. And Commissioner, it's always good to have you here with us. So I'll open the floor up to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having us, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if I might, I brought a few folks with me. I was going to introduce them. They're going to be around the Capitol as we visit this year. Major Chris Reeves, Lieutenant Colonel Scotty Jones, Colonel Carter. We have Randy Taylor here with us, our Michelle Carter and Brian Ferguson. You know Brian. We have a new lady who's going to be working with us on our budget this year, just recently hired, Kathy Roberts. She's here with us today, and I think she's going to be a blessing to us. Y'all have had to put up with me and Brian dealing with the budget numbers for several years now. We've actually hired a real professional to start working on the numbers for us. So to begin with, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to briefly read you the MDWFP mission. We think it's very important over there, and I think it serves the people of the state of Mississippi well. Committed and the MDWFP mission is we are committed to serving and enhancing Mississippi's wildlife, fisheries, and parks, and providing quality outdoor recreation and engaging the public in natural resource conservation. And to that end, I'm going to begin by saying a few words, and most of those words are really is a thank you to what you have done for us over the last few years. And when I say thank you, I mean the thank yous coming from all the hunters, fishermen, campers, and outdoor enthusiasts that we serve, and it's made a big improvement on the conditions and the facilities that they're able to take advantage of. And we feel like since we started this project and the bigger project on parks in 21, that we're continuing to make major improvements every year with y'all's help, and we look forward to continuing to extend our upgrades and improvement to not only just our parks, but our state lakes and WMAs as we move forward. So again, thank you for giving us the funds that we need to work with over at MDWFP. We're very appreciative of that. I want to talk just a little bit about I want to kind of put up my goal here is to try to tell you what we've done with the money you've given us, and then Brian's going to try to tell you about the request this year. But I want you to know that we're trying to be good stewards of the money that you've given us. And it is a huge impact that we have as an outdoor agency on the economic impact of state hunting. We have over 275,000 hunters, putting in about $658 million into the economy, about 398,000 fishermen, putting in about $772 million into the economy. Recreational boating actually adds about 1.5 billion. And even bird watching at 829 billion, and shooting sports, which is a program we're really proud of, puts in about 950 million impact there. All total impact of some of the outdoor recreation here in the state of Mississippi is somewhere between $4 to $6 billion, and we're very proud of that. When we started here a couple of years ago, we, for all practical purposes, didn't have an outdoor marketing or research outreach program. We've tried to really concentrate on the social medias. We've put a brand initiative in our parks. We've expanded our outdoor media drastically. We redesigned our website, and we've increased our social media presence by over 200%, which it still needs things to do because we didn't have much of a presence a few years ago, but we feel like we're headed in the right direction in a lot of different ways over at MDWFP. Y'all have been very kind to us over the years. When it comes to giving us $400,000 every year for CWD management, I'm sorry to tell you that about all we're doing and about all we can do is just try to control the disease. We've had a record number of positives found already this year, and even to the point to make me interested, we're even finding some of the CWD prions in some of the scrapes throughout the delta. So it's not just in the deer itself; it's starting to take place on the environment itself. So a new thing to watch there. We served over almost 300,000 people through our public education programs that mostly ran through the museum.
Commissioner, I want to stop you for 1 second because this was something that was brought up. But go back to the scrape that you were. How long have you been testing scrapes for?
Really started, to my knowledge, about I'm gonna say somewhere around 2 years ago. When we first started somebody got the idea, let's start checking the rub branches and the scrapes. And it didn't take long. We started finding them almost immediately.
And how do you collect those samples?
Just go out there and get some dirt out of the scrape or break a leaf off and take it back to the lab. And
Okay, so you're not having hunters go in or collect any specimen or anything for
all
you?
that's done through Mississippi State, some of our research biologists.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that was something that I
No,
wanted to bring up real quick.
Feel
Thank
free
you.
to interrupt us anytime. We want to say just briefly, how proud we are of the Flores Bluff State Park. It's voted the best park in the state of Mississippi in 2024, as well as our Natural Science Museum being voted the best museum in the state. We made a lot of improvements over the Flores Bluff State Park. We're really proud of, and here again, it's thanks to the money that you've given us all together in our parks. Ballpark figure of around $70 million has been spent since we started this. Y'all put in approximately 35 million, about 15 or so million in probably capital improvement fund. No, 35 million that y'all have put in capital improvement funds. And then we've picked up the ARPA funds as well as the LWCF money that we've been able to leverage for about $15 million there. So we're working our way through improving all of the 25 state parks that we have. We see some photos in there about some different things that we've done around the park. When we started this project, it was to go to make each park completely whole as we got through with it, not just piecemeal the thing. We're trying to do some innovative things there, putting new stores in parks and redoing the cabins and making the pads big enough. But the thing about parks prior to us starting to renovate them, we put Wi-Fi some of them, but you couldn't, if you had a pocket full of money, you couldn't spend it anywhere in the park. So we're trying to change that to give people, it makes it more convenient for people, and it does put some additional income into the flow of the system in the parks. Got a brief slide in your handout there that shows where we started with the parks. We started with 5, and was Percy Quinn, Natchez, Clarko, Paul B, and Waldoxie. And we're working our way through those, and it's an ongoing process. But here again, about $70 million prior to our answer this year on what we're wanting to spend on parks and trying to carry out the renovation program that y'all charged us to carry out. We're one of our biggest ants this time, and I want to make this clear. Brian will get to it, but last year y'all were really kind to us and gave us $7.1 million didn't have anything to do with raises for law enforcement officers. It all went straight to actually their budget, operating budget. For years, we saw our parks get run down because, just be honest about it, we were using funds from parks to fund law enforcement, and y'all were kind enough to give us that 7.1 million where we're not having to pull that anymore. So as a result of having those funds available to us, we've already started a program to keep these parks in good shape. Not only are we renovating them, but we want to maintain them once they're renovated. So, but talking briefly about what our conservation officers do, they serve the 2.9 million residents of the state of Mississippi, and we touch the lives of everyone in all 82 counties every day. We also have to look over 1.2 million of national forest land, 19.9 million of state land, over 700,000 acres in wildlife management areas, 119 public lakes, 5,000 rivers and creeks there. We're having a difficult time trying to keep our law enforcement officers there. They're the best trained law enforcement officers in the state of Mississippi, bar none. They take 12 hours of training at our Makota offices, headquarters, and then they go on to the Malota, which is a regular 12-hour course that all the rest of the law enforcement people attend to. Our officers are constantly being elected to the and making getting awarded awards for being the highest ranked in any of the cadets out that actually go to the Malota class. So, but we can't keep enough of them because they're underpaid, and we're getting picked off after we put a tremendous amount of investment, time, and money in training these officers. They're getting picked off by counties, they're getting picked off by municipalities, and I ask y'all to take a look at that this time. We think we'll be money ahead if we can get this salary up a little bit, where we're not losing the office and continue to circle on our officers. I mentioned earlier about the 7.1. I just want to make it clear that was nothing to do with raises. Our request this year is to do with raises. It's the 1.9 million that Brian will be talking about a little later there. So that's pretty much, we'll both be available to answer any questions y'all might have as once he completes his talk on the actual budget request this year. But I'll be happy to answer any questions right now if anybody would have any. If not, Brian can talk about specific money.
Chairman Suber, thank you for coming. I know you're not a part of the subcommittee at this time, but you know you're always welcome as a chairman here and as a senator to speak. Do you have anything that you would like to, any other questions at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not at this time, but I might once we get going.
Great, thank you very much. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. And I want to start with just kind of reiterating the concept that before on last year's budget request, that $7.1 million we used to kind of start our operating expenses and maintain those state parks. It has worked. It has benefited state parks a lot. We've been able to now maintain state parks, and we have all of our maintenance goals in place, and we're actually working toward satisfying some of those. So a lot of their work is now getting pulled out, actually done now that we have the funds in the agency to do that. I want to briefly talk about the compensation program that we have right now. Currently, where we are right now, I want to kind of show where our salaries are. So we're specifically talking about our law enforcement division now, and our request for $1.9 million that we're going to talk about as a general fund request is giving us the ability to move to these proposed salaries. These proposed salaries, as you can see, start off and have an impact on every one of the ranks that's within our agency now. Even starting off with our private 2 years, that's where most of our officers are leaving. Over the last 10 years, we've had a kind of a net zero in our officer growth. We should have over 200 officers. We're still hanging around at 185 to 190 over every year. Even though we're recruiting officers and bringing in 20 in the cadet class, we're losing officers just as fast. A lot of that is mostly those early salaries. So these brings us to a competitive salaries, and that's kind of our focus for our request this year. I want to move to the sheet here. The long sheet is actually our budget request for FY 2026. And on the back of that, I kind of left some notes. It'll have some highlights of the 2025 notes, but also our strategic focus, particularly for this request for 2026. But starting off on our general fund request, this is a $6.9 million request for the salaries for our state park employees, and a $4.6 million request for the natural science employees. As you can see, the $7.1 million request is still in there for the operational expenses for law enforcement, and the $1.9 million request for our law enforcement salary increases are there. We continue that to our $350,000 request for our marketing initiatives, and again, our $400,000 request to continue for chronic wasting disease. That's a total request for $21.4 million. And moving on from there, I have our state support funds, other state support funds. What we want to try to work on this year is JP Coleman, Trace, additional work at Paul B, and then moving on to Lake Lincoln, Leroy Percy, and Trace. JP Coleman, Trace, Lake Lincoln, and Leroy Percy will be all new parks that we're going to be working on this year, and that's a request for $13.4 million. We do have about $3.5 million that we can match that with this year, and another $3.5 million that we'll match from next year. So we can make that 13.4 over the next 2 years into about $20 million in work for the parks. The museum equipment improvements, we have done a lot of improvements there already. We have a lot going on at the museum now. This $1.5 million request will actually finalize that, but one of the major things we want to try to accomplish there is the things like the elevators. We literally have people get trapped in elevators at that museum, so we've started to work on some of those things. Now the equipment there is 25 years old as far as computer equipment and those type of things, speakers and that. But they do a great job. A lot of programs at the museum, and is growing a lot due to that playground being there as well. The Education Enhancement Fund, this is a new request. We generally get $125,000 and $335,000 there. This Education Enhancement Fund, and we talked to LBO about this earlier this year, just to enhance some of our educational program. A lot of people don't know that we do STEM programs at the museum. We have educators and they actually work at schools around the state. It's only 4 of them right now. What we want to try to accomplish with this request was to actually expand that program and try to expand it out into some of the parks, get people coming to WMAs, state lakes and those things. And so we wanted to purchase some one-time equipment for that, some vans, different things like that, that we'll be able to actually go out into the field and bring those schools to our facilities to do some of the work and learn outside. That has been working. We've done a program at Paul B. Johnson now, a homeschool program. So we actually have a program like that going on now at one of the parks. These next requests are starting with Lake Lamar Bruce, the campground improvements. We talked some about that last year, about a $1.6 million improvements. The lake has been improved already. This is the surrounding area of the campgrounds that we want to try to make some improvements to here. The next one is Neshoba County Spillway. That lake we've drained, it's actually needs repair. So the lake is currently drained, $2.4 million to repair that lake. Prentice Walker Dam repair is a requirement from DEQ. And they actually have, this is the 25% amount, 2.3 million. They already have about $4.5 to $5 million dedicated in federal funds for that. This is the 2.3 would be the matching funds for us to repair that dam. And this law enforcement building and you'll see some of this on the back, is $750,000. It's a facility that we currently own in Jackson. It's over near the Natural Science Museum. It's where our SRT team is, they deploy out of. That's where they keep all the equipment. Currently it's unsecure, and so now we have equipment all around the state as opposed to having it in that one spot, so they can deploy faster from that one location and keep all the equipment secure. The last request is our special fund request for authority. We have some growing apportionments in different areas, so we wanted to include this $64.7 million in wildlife, 13.3 million for state parks, our Natural Science Museum, 2.2, special projects, 1.7, and 1.3 in our motor vehicle fund for a sum total of authority of $83.3 million. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions at this time? No, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for, I'm sorry I walked in late on your presentation, but had a few questions. One is, how is visitor numbers? Are they up for the campgrounds, and some of the renovations have been made? Is that helping to bring in visitors?
They are, but the major parks, Paul B., Roosevelt somewhat complete. Paul B has been shut down for a while. Percy Quinn's back open, wide open. And last thing we have to do there is 18 CCC cabins that we're going to finish down there. And of course, Buccaneer on the coast is wide open, and this big summertime resort there. We have put Wi-Fi in it, which we found that if you stay, rather than staying 2 days, if you got Wi-Fi, they'll stay a week. And the numbers are not as good as they could be with these, or will be once these new other parks are open. But yes, we feel like we're on the right track and they're doing well.
Yeah, and it's I think one of the biggest things we talked about in the off season was your salaries issues for some of your field, I'm going to call them field worker, people out in the field, and the wardens and others that you have out. Is that right?
Law enforcement folks there.
Yeah.
We have a fund in there, we're asking 1.9 million. It's sheet in that brochure. That's where we like to give the folks the different raises. We feel like we make them competitive here, and we started out at the bottom because we've losing so many people at the lower level, and we've spent a lot of time and money in training them, and in the first 2 or 3 years we're losing them. So we feel like if we get the salary up just a little bit, it would make it a lot more competitive for us, and we wouldn't be spending as much money training people and just going in a vicious circle there.
Gotcha. And then final question, when I look at your vacancy map, there's a pretty good number of those in the Delta, where there's all kind of hunting in the Delta.
It is.
Can you move some of those areas? I mean, not to say there's not hunting all over the state, but goodness gracious, I mean, from Madison all the way up to Tunica County, you're either 1 or 0, with the exception of Washington and Tallahatchie.
We're very cognizant of the fact that we need folks in that, and we're actively recruiting folks. It's just it just be, bottom line is, if you're not from the Delta, you don't want to go to the Delta, and we have.
It's beautiful. It's great in the Delta. People need to listen up.
We're cognizant of that, and we're trying to recruit
About half my
from the
district.
Delta to put them up there in those spots.
Okay, everybody listening, come to the Delta.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and thank you, not Mr. Commissioner, Director, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Suber, do you have any questions? All right. I still call him Commissioner. It's just a habit. Commissioner, in the past, we've talked about the dollars that have been spent to upgrade the parks and where that money's going and the rate of return that we're looking at, or some type of return that we're going to measure. As these new parks are coming online, what I would like to get from you at some point in time is a spreadsheet very similar to what you have here, but to show the P&L for each individual park, to show what those investments are returning in revenue numbers, and then also what the expenses, how the expenses are tracking with any additional maintenance that's been ongoing. Kind of want to get an idea of where we're bleeding and where we're making revenue and where we're generating money, and where that flows back into the parks. I would assume that it's going to be done in your special fund numbers. But I would like to just take a look at that, because I want to look at that over time to show and to be able to tell people that we've invested this money and this is the return that we're getting outside of just the normal experiences for the public. Also, on your law enforcement numbers, the compensation program, this map or this chart that you have here, could you please, just for my own purposes, give me a breakdown of how many people, how many pins are in each class, just so I have an idea of what that looks like.
Got some detailed reports for you there.
Perfect. This is great. Can I have this? Thank you. And then last year we had an issue with reservation system for the parks. And then y'all took that on, if I remember this correctly, you brought that back in-house and you're doing that. How is your reservation system working? And where are any shortcomings within that system now?
We'll let Brian.
On the
address
park
that.
side, so we've actually canceled the contract with our current vendor, and we've moved to a new vendor, which will go live April the 1st. So we think it's a much more intuitive system, a lot more data-driven, marketing system is a whole lot better and more customer-friendly on the front end also. So we'll know exactly how it goes starting April 1st.
Okay. So are reservations being taken at this point for?
It's still currently being taken with the old vendor, and they'll
Mhm.
turn theirs off at the end of March, and we'll turn on a new system April 1st.
Okay. Will the new system be able to recapture cancellations?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just for informational purposes, I just let the members of the committee know that we will also be changing over a new license reservation system that's scheduled to go live February the 18th. So that'll be another process that we'll be going through, trying to improve the things that license system hasn't been changed out in 18 years. So it's time to make a change there too.
So that will help recapture some of the people that have let their licenses go, go without renewal. Are you going to be able to kind of focus on that a little bit more? Okay. All right. I'll tell you what, we'll sit down with Chairman Suber at a later date and kind of walk through a couple of individual things that he may have over on the policy side as we move forward. But I want to thank you for your time. And any other questions, gentlemen? Do you have any questions? Good. We finished 4 minutes early. That's unheard of. Look forward to working for y'all this year, going through and answering these questions. Do you have any questions of us? Feel free to provide us any information. Look forward to working with you over this session.
Okay, just
Thank
let us
you.
know when you need the information, we'll provide it. Thank you for your time today.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started on it, on MDEQ's budget hearing. I'd like to recognize Chris Wells, our Director of DEQ, and I'd like to welcome. And I appreciate being able to work with you in the past and look forward to working with you on this side of the ledger on the appropriation side. So thank you, sir. It's good to see you.
Same here. Appreciate the opportunity as always, and really enjoyed working with you on the Environment Committee the last couple of years. And of course, we've been working together for a long time on a lot of things. So I'm glad to keep doing this. But I'm gonna cut to the chase on as far as our budget request. I gave you a no frills one pager there that kind of outlines what we're asked for. I will start out with thanking you for the support that and generosity that you've shown DEQ over the last, you being the legislature as a whole, but certainly appropriations committees. The support that y'all have given us, the generosity that you've shown in the increases that we've had over the last couple of fiscal years. I take that as a recognition of the value of our agency, and we're very proud of the work that we do, trying to balance reasonable and rational environmental protection, regulatory work with responsible economic development. And that's the fine line that we walk every day. And so with that preface, I don't want any of the increases that we are asking for to be perceived as a lack of appreciation for what we've received in the past. We are essentially asking for level funding for this year. And I say essentially because there are a couple of add-ons that we've listed here. One is we have, as you know, a lot of technical staff. We have several career ladders for our technical and non-technical staff, but particularly for the technical staff. And we have, we provide educational benchmarks and that sort of thing. And so we've, if you take last year's level funding, $14,124,476, that does not include the, there was some matching funds included in our total general fund appropriation, that matching funds for the state revolving loan fund. If you deduct those matching funds, the general funds appropriation was $14 million, that $14 million number. We would ask to add to that $390,304 in budgeted benchmarks for educational and career ladder benchmarks. We're also asking, I'm going to skip down to item D, asking for $250,000 toward an ongoing project that we have to convert to being paperless, electronic document management. We've been working on that for last couple of years and will continue to do so. We've gotten vendors in place and beginning to purchase hardware and software licenses and so forth that we need to do the scanning of legacy documents, but to be able to manage our documents and so forth going forward electronically. We think that's a benefit to both our agency in terms of efficiency, but also to the public. And I'll come back to that efficiency theme in a minute. The last item, in addition to the level funding from last year, is we're asking for $1.1 million and change. That is specifically associated with a request to increase our head count by 17. And I wanted to talk a minute about our head count. Last year, we were appropriated 377. At the time that number was derived, and the conversations that we had, that meant that we would have to cut 56 vacancies, which we did. We identified 56 vacancies for elimination. What did not get, I believe, factored in and accounted for is that we had 9 people in escalated pins at the time. Those after the fact, those pins were converted from escalated to time limited by the personnel board. Now, they said that was standard practice. I'm not disputing that, although we don't believe it had been done for at least the previous 7 fiscal years. So we had no reason to anticipate it would be done this time, but it was. And that's fine, except that it made us have to find 65 pins to cut to meet the 377. And it really put us in more of a pinch than I think was than was intended. And I say that, I bring that up simply to say we currently have 8 people in escalated pins. Now, I don't really care whether they stay escalated or if they're converted to time limited. My request would be that our appropriated headcount account for those escalated pins if they're going to be converted. We believe that we are currently at 350 employees. And we believe that we are understaffed at 350. We frankly think that we would be understaffed at 377, and we've identified 17. We've itemized them at the bottom of the handout there. We've identified 17 additional positions that we would like to have added on top of the 377 plus whatever escalated pins may get converted. We have, and you know, I know someone say, well, you're at 350, you've been at 350 for some time now, and you seem to be getting the job done. Well, yes and no. Very proud of the work that our staff does. We've got a lot of very conscientious people that frankly are carrying more than the average workload. And in fact, I could submit and would submit that we're not really getting the job done with 350 employees. Our contractual expenditures for engineering services, if you exclude some programmatic contracts like our support contractors for the ARPA program and the restoration program, if you exclude those contracts and look just at our engineering services contracts, which are staff augmentation contracts, our expenditures have gone up over 100% over the last 2 fiscal years, over 50% each fiscal year. And they continue to increase. And the point being that we are spending more and more on contractual support to augment that 350 staff. And the fact that we're not at 377 is not for a lack of trying on our part. We have advertised 243, posted 243 job advertisements since May of 2023, last year and a half or so. Between May of 2023 and the end of last calendar year, we hired 73 people, and we lost 75. We had a net loss of 2 people during that May of 23 to the end of December 24. The point being that we continue to advertise, we continue to hire, we continue to have a lot of turnover. 56% of our staff currently have less than 10 years of service with the state. That is, as we all know, not sustainable long-term. Now, we've made strides to try to, and that's, I should have also mentioned, I mean, to tell you what we did with that generous increase that you gave us, particularly last year, is we've been able to, it's allowed us to get our salaries up, particularly our starting salaries for entry-level positions. And we believe that we're now much more competitive in terms of recruitment and retention, but we really haven't had that in place long enough to see how that's going to play out. I think that our turnover rate is trending downward, which is good. And that's why we're not asking for additional general funds this year for pay raises. We're asking for additional funds just associated with adding vacancies. I think that we're on a good trajectory. I hope that continues. I started to lose my train of thought. We're not at 377, not because we haven't tried and not because we don't think we need that many people. It's just we've not been able to get there. And from a budgeting standpoint, we would submit that we need to prepare and assume that we are going to be able to hire those folks now that we've gotten our salaries more competitive. Maybe we get closer to that 377 plus in terms of fill-in positions. So again, I've itemized it there. It's level funding plus those 3 items, and glad to answer any questions that you might have for me.
So last year, the bill that you and I worked on for using outside contractors to help with the permitting process where you were charging the applicants
Right.
a rate commensurate with the work that needed to be performed. Can you tell me where we are with that?
So I'm glad you brought that up. I should have let you know. So the commission has approved template language for contracts with applicants. We did an RFQ process. It took us a couple months to get that where it needed to be. We are now at the stage of all of the contractors that met the minimum qualifications have agreed to a uniform rate sheet. And we are in the process of getting contracts put in place with each of those contractors. And at that point, we will then be able to, and I do think, still continue to believe that's going to be a useful tool for us. We'll see what kind of demand there is for it, how much people take advantage of it. But that is definitely going to be one way that we can, but we've also, in that vein, we've also already started turning a lot of stuff over to contractors. That's one reason our contractual expenses are up. But the direct answer to your question is we are very close to being able to, I know it's almost a year down the road, but it has just taken us that long to get through the process, get it in place.
Okay, one of the benefits of it is that that program was so that you wouldn't have to have contractual services or pay for contractual services for those reviews, that would be done by the applicant. So it would not draw on additional contractual services for your budget. Again, this is my first time handling your budget, but this contractual services are alarming. And I would like to see by division where those contractual services are used the most and where those increases are. And I'm going to continue to work with you on the AI stuff, but y'all are prime for that.
Yes, sir. Well, two things there. One is, I'm glad you mentioned that because not all of those contractual expenditures are for permitting.
Sure, I don't know.
So that is a valid point. Hopefully that some of those expenditures that have been related to permitting, hopefully will, but that assumes somebody wants to pay for it. So we anticipate that there will continue to need to be some contractual expenses even for permitting support. But you're right that we should hopefully see a downtick there. You mentioned AI, and I'm glad you did. I have charged all of our executive team with looking for ways. I know that there's going to be in accordance with governor's executive order, there's going to be an inventory made of AI tools that are being used within state government. But I do think that there are things that we have to do, and we are not just asking for additional pens. And I'm glad, that's the reason I'm glad you brought that up, because I want you to know that we are look at ourselves in the mirror, and we're looking for ways to be as efficient and effective with the human resources that we are trusted with. Get the most out of the team that we have, right? And whether that's using AI, whether that is restructuring, we're looking at ways that we can reorganize, and if we can restructure the way we're doing business and reallocate workload and that kind of thing, we're looking at those kinds of things. It's not just we're taking an all of the above approach to try to find ways to to maximize what we have, the amount of work that we get out of the staff that we do have. The concern that I have is that one of the concerns I have is that we've got people that are, and I've got examples of people that are doing more than their fair share, if you will, in addition to having contractual staff augmentation. For example, we've got a small business assistance program, and there's a lady in that program that she's an engineer, and her job is to help folks with compliance issues with small business, and we provide that as a service. In her spare time that she has none of, she's also helping do stormwater pollution prevention plan reviews for construction stormwater, because we've been so behind there. We've also, but that stormwater, and you're familiar with that program in particular, we've done some reorganizing. We've changed the job title here and there, and we've tried to get some look harder at how we've distributed that workload and how we're managing that that branch, and we've gotten our turnaround time from about 90 days a year and a half ago, 90 to 100 days. We're now down to around 60. So we're making improvements in that regard.
That's good. Let me ask you on your turnovers. You said that you had hired 73 and lost 75. Is that correct? Of the 73 that you've hired, how many of those are lost in the last year?
Well, I don't have the breakdown.
I mean, is it that big? I mean, are you having people that come into the agency and then decide that they want to get, that this wasn't cut out for them? I'm just
We
curious.
have a few of those. I think our record is, the record shortest stint is 8 hours. We had somebody start on a Monday and resign by the end of the day. I think that was an outlier.
I'd hope so.
But it's kind of that's one of those interesting records. I think our turnover is more it's in that 1 to 5 year time frame. You just have a lot of folks that may come and stay a few years, not so many that only stay a few months. But it's just there's so many that when you in the aggregate that they just it adds up over time.
1 second.
Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge me for one moment,
I guess so, Mr. Chairman.
because I'm running late for another meeting, but I am interested. I think last year and years past, the biggest issue was what the chairman referenced, and that's the permitting problem. As the ARPA projects and other things start to wind down, have you got any forecasting on what you think is going to be needed? Are we where we need to be? Is that going to slowly start tailing off? Not to say that you may not need others in other areas. If you can forecast for us just for a moment, and I got to run and
It's a great question. I'll give you a quick answer. The no is the answer and the reason is the way we set up that program. I set up a management team within the agency, but the vast majority of that work is being handled through contractors. We do have a management team of 5 and two full-time employees that are managing the contractors and the grants. But when the ARPA program ends, at most we would have 2 people that we would have to sort of reabsorb back into the.
Okay. All right. I do want to follow up with that some more detail about what that would be done, but I'm already a few minutes late or something else, but thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chris.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
So on the additional 17 headcount that you're asking for, I would like to see where those pins would go.
Okay,
And just a breakdown of that. I don't need it at this moment, but just take a look at that and see.
sure.
And
You're
then,
talking about by division as opposed to by the
Correct.
job class.
that's correct.
I will say that not all of that is permitting, so for what that's worth.
And we'll talk about this a lot later, but where's your head on the Waters of the State program?
So as you know, we published draft regulations January 3rd. It was important to me for us to do that at or before the beginning of the session for a number of reasons, not the least of which I wanted you in particular, but several other members of the legislature that have been watching it closely and working with us on it, wanted you to know that we are progressing and where we were headed with it. Currently, the draft regulations take the approach of broadly defining the natural resource that we want to protect under the Air and Water Pollution Control Law, and it is limited just to the Air and Water Pollution Control Law. We're not talking about waters for any purposes other than pollution prevention permitting. And broadly define that resource, basically leave it broad the way it was defined since the 60s. But then it establishes a number of exemptions from permitting and what we're calling conditional exemptions, which are in essence permitting certain activities by rule. The idea there is that nobody wants to have to come get a permit from DEQ if they don't absolutely have to. And we don't want to have to issue any more permits than we absolutely have to. Going back to the headcount issue. I would have to ask for many more pins than I'm asking for to be able to manage a program as vast as what the historical wetlands permitting program has been. We've got to find a way to provide those environmental protections in a way that does not cause my agency to have to be any bigger than it has to be or any more expensive than it needs to be, is as efficient as it can be, and strikes that balance that I mentioned earlier between responsible environmental protection and reasonable economic growth. We don't want to be any more of a bottleneck than we have to, but we also want to make sure that we're not derelict in our duties from the environmental protection standpoint. So those regulations try to strike that balance, and I hope folks will see it for what it is. We have we've established a much longer than normal public notice period. Normally, regulations go out for public notice for 30 days. We've got the public notice period going out through April, the middle of April. We've got a public hearing scheduled for April 17th. And I feel certain that we would be amenable to extending that public comment period if folks need it, because we want to get it right. This is a watershed, pun intended, moment for us, and it's arguably the biggest, most important issue in water regulation that we've dealt with since the initial inception of the program back in the 70s. So we want to get it right, and we certainly want to make sure that we're not doing it in a ivory tower kind of way.
So with respect to your budget request that you have today, or here before us today, does that account, or does that program factor into your request?
I would say not directly.
So, but then would you anticipate that would come up on a FY27 request?
If we need, if where we land with those regulations, we feel like we will require additional staffing, yes, it would be something we would circle back to.
Okay. All right. Have any other questions? All right, so what Corbin was just asking me about is this 6,023,286 request for, is this a match for the
Loan program.
loan program?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you're looking for that outside of your budget, so you're looking for capital expense funds or other means?
Well, last year and on more than one occasion over the years, it's been in our general fund appropriation. There are some potential problems with it being in the general fund appropriation, but at the end of the day, whether it's capital expense, bonds, general funds, or other, that state match amount, we get $5 federal dollars for every $1 in state match. And whether that's included in our general fund appropriation is almost immaterial. I will say almost immaterial.
And what is that used for?
So that's the seed, that's our matching funds to draw down federal. So we get under the Federal Clean Water Act, Congress appropriates a certain amount of money each year to that loan program. The states manage the loan program at the state level. And we can draw down, we get a capitalization grant, and we can draw down on that up to a maximum amount. And we get $5 in federal grant money for every $1 in state match we put. That all goes into a revolving loan fund, and our current interest rate is 0.75% on a 15-year note and 1 3/4 on a 30-year note. Isn't that right? I think that's right. Very low interest. It's still it's always been a popular program, but even with the ARPA money that's floating around, the demand continues to be pretty heavy, especially now that Horn Lake has been kicked out of Memphis by a federal judge. We can go into more detail about that if you need it, but basically they've got a $300 million problem on their hand in DeSoto County, and they're looking to the state revolving fund. So that $6 million number is a little bit higher than it normally would be, but that's because there's some BIL money that is supplementing that program at the federal level. We're assuming that that's not getting caught up in the executive order that regarding BIL and IRA expenditures. We don't, we have to assume that's not going to affect this and ask for the full match and hope that we can draw down all of those dollars. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, yeah, this is a fund that I'm not familiar with. I just haven't had a chance to deal with it. So who would be the applicants for this, or who would this benefit? Cities and-
Municipalities and utility authorities.
Okay,
It's if you're familiar with there's two loan programs, one at the health department for drinking water
Mhm.
infrastructure. Ours is for wastewater infrastructure. And it is, yeah, like I said, it's a revolving loan fund. People, municipalities and utility authorities can get loans from us at low interest, below market rate, to construct or upgrade or repair wastewater infrastructure. There's a certain percentage of that, for certain municipalities that can be, given as what we call a subsidized loan, which in essence ends up making it sort of like a grant, for a certain percentage of it anyway. And so it's been a very popular
what's
program.
the overall size of the loan, of the loan fund?
Oh, the loan fund, I think there's about, do you know offhand how much is in that fund? It's complicated because because it's a revolving fund, the amount available each year for loans depends on repayments and interest and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the interest goes to pay off bonds, which has been used in the past for the matching funds. So
Is it
I
a 50
want to
million
say-
or 100 million or
I want to say
200?
it's more on the magnitude of 100 million.
Okay, and then so
think-
annually you'll get to do somewhere in the neighborhood of how much in new loans?
I think it's I want to say it's somewhere around between 50 and 100 million, I think each year. It varies a little bit.
Okay,
So 31 million would be, the 6 million would allow us to draw down 31 million. I don't have the total that's in the fund right now, but I think we've got about, depending on there's some actuarial stuff that gets over my head, but I think that we could max out somewhere around 150 to 200 million in loans in any one given fiscal year. And that's depending on repayments and that kind of thing.
170 million last year.
Okay. I wasn't too far off.
good, okay. That's fine, yeah, I just want to learn a little bit more
Yeah, I
about it.
should have been prepared to tell you that. Matt.
The other thing is, just want to make sure y'all are tracking all ARPA projects and all ARPA stuff, so you're familiar
We
with
submitted our
everything.
report, our quarterly report just this afternoon. Just so you'll know, out of we ended up right around 433 million, between 430 and 435 million in obligated grants.
Awards. Mhm.
And we've paid out, the report we submitted today said 81 million, but that was as of last quarter. I think we're close to somewhere around 83 million now in actual, some projects are being closed out. The program is really progressing well, I think.
Okay, great. Y'all have any other questions? You need anything more on that? Okay.
Thank you.
Director, appreciate it. Always glad to have you in here.
I'm here. Thank
You
you.
too, Allison. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with the Mississippi Oil and Gas Board budget request. Go ahead and turn it over. How about it? Thank you.
Good to see y'all today. My name is Jess New. I'm the Executive Director of the State Oil and Gas Board. Don't have a lot for you today. We are in agreement and request approval of LBO's recommendation. Sorry.
There we go. Try that again.
My name is Jess New. I'm the Executive Director of the State Oil and Gas Board. We are here today we're in agreement with LBO's recommendation for our fiscal year 26 budget request with a couple of little tweaks. In that request, LBO's recommendation was 6.6 million and some change. Roughly about 3.6 of that is our operating money. 3 million of that is what's currently listed as federal funds. But it was our intent to request $3 million in emergency plug-in funds. So it's two different uses of those monies. For our operational money, that comes out of the Oil and Gas Conservation Fund. We're not asking for a general fund appropriation for that operating money for the Oil and Gas Conservation Fund. That's our special fund. We've got our own money. We just need spending authority to use it. On the $3 million, we are requesting an appropriation of $3 million for emergency plugging funds. Those funds are used to plug orphan and abandoned wells throughout the state. Last year, we were given 2.3 million. We're on schedule to have all that money spent by June 30th of this year. We've got projects. The remaining projects are in play right now and will be completed. We are also requesting an additional 2.5 million in spending authority only. This is so the last couple of years, we've received several grants from the Department of the Interior, one for the plugging of orphaned oil and gas wells. One was an initial grant for $5 million. We've completed that project. We are now in the middle of or at the beginning phases of what's called a formula grant, which was for $6.8 million. And we expect to receive an additional 2.5 million in fiscal year 26. So we're not asking for that money. We just need the authority to spend it when we get it. And so our total spending authority request is $9.1 million. And if I go too fast, if you want to stop me, please do.
Just give me 1 second. Let me look at something.
Okay.
Where am I getting this? Where's this 9.1?
Did you add the 2.5 after the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
so That would be increased, the federal amount would be increased
To 2.5.
to get to that.
That's right. It's that 6.631 number
Yes.
plus 2.5 million.
Difference. That is that.
That's right.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
The only actual funds we're asking for is the 3 million in plugging funds. The rest is just a spending authority.
But the 3 million that you're asking, that's new money out of your own,
No, sir, that would be a separate appropriation.
out of capital expense. Okay.
It would go to our emergency plugging fund. We've got two special funds. The Oil and Gas Conservation Fund is our operational money, and the emergency plugging fund is our plugging fund for orphan wells.
Okay. All right. So, okay. Let me go back to the orphan well. If I remember last year, there was some discussion about that, some inquiries about how many orphan wells do we have?
That's right.
How many are we able to plug a year? Because we've been doing this for a number of years.
Right.
You've been doing it for a long time, but I mean, we've been tracking it for a number
Very
of years.
aggressive in tracking the last 5-6 years.
So how many new wells, orphan wells are popping up?
So one of the project scopes with the federal grant that we've had is locating and identifying orphan wells. And so If you allow me to break it up into the first grant was the initial grant. That was a $5 million grant. That was all surface remediation work and plugging wells. We completed 41 project sites with the initial grant. We're on the formula grant that we have right now, it's $6.8 million. And what we've done, the big piece of that is location, identification, ranking, and characterization. So we're spending a big chunk of that money really going out there. Some of our records are antiquated, and in some of these wells are what we call legacy wells that were drilled in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So a big part of this phase 2 of our project is going out there and putting eyes on these sites. So it may be we go out there, we put eyes on a site, we check a box and we say there's nothing that needs to be done. It could be a large, very expensive full-scale plugging operation, but until we get our eyes on these sites, we don't know. On the formula grant side, what we're currently doing, we've identified 450 project sites. Not all of those are going to be plug-in jobs or remediation jobs. A good chunk of them probably will be something. But we have to, in order to keep the federal money flowing, we've got to have a queue. And so that's what we're doing now is building out our inventory. So when other grant opportunities come along, we're in a position to apply for them. So to answer your question, how many orphan wells are out there? We don't know, or we know what we know. Right now, we've got 450 orphan well sites. We've got 900 plus orphan well sites that we've identified, but we're addressing half of those right now, the 450. And so it's very likely that as our field inspectors get out there and they check the box on these sites, that they uncover new sites. And so it's just, we know what we know. And so roughly what we know right now is roughly about 1,000. There's more than that out there, but that's what we've identified right now in the project scope.
How many contractors do you have that apply for these?
Right now, we've got 4 under contract right now. 3 of those are Mississippi companies. The first phase, we had 2 other companies that worked with us on the first phase that were Louisiana companies. On the matching grant, which we have submitted an application for, that's phase 3. We haven't been awarded that money yet. I think we sent that, or the proposals, the work proposals out to 7 contractors total. So it's hit and miss. Some of those are plugging contractors. Some of those are plugging and remediation contractors. There's methane monitoring is involved in this process, as some of those contractors only do methane monitoring. So it's just, some of them do everything and some of the other contractors do bits and pieces of the project.
Okay.
The problem we've encountered with plugging wells is the expense. What used to cost $45,000, $50,000 to plug a well is now upwards of about $90,000. It's almost doubled. So that means we do fewer projects.
Before I go on any further, Mr. Chairman, anything?
You too.
All right. Is there anything else you want to?
No, like I said, no general fund request for operating money. We do not need any additional pins. We've really worked the last several years beefing up our staff, and we've had some success finally doing that, especially with my technical positions, which is traditionally the hardest ones to fill. We do need authority to purchase 2 new fleet vehicles. We've had 2 trucks that are aging out and are costing more to keep on the road than they're worth. And then there is some language that has been in our bill most every year, dealing with our comprehensive data management system, which is RBDMS. It's how we keep up with all the oil and gas records. It gives us authority to spend $200,000 out of our own money every single year. We're not asking for $200,000. It's just authority to put that money toward our data program. Other than that, that's all we've got this year.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I have this right. You talked about a queue, that you have a queue that you have set up for this plugging. Are you able to spend the 2.3 million that we appropriated last year? Are you spending that down? Are you done with those projects, or where are you?
Those projects are in progress. What we've seen, some of the contractors that we had on the federal work are also so on the state money that we've been given, we try to give that to Mississippi contractors. We need Mississippi contractors to bid, and we need those bids to be the lowest and best, but we have been successful in doing that. What slowed us down, not really slowed us down, the weather slows us down some, but some of the contractors that are working on the federal grants are also working on what we call the state projects, which are just the projects that we use state money only for. So yes, that 2.3 will be spent. I think we've got 6 projects currently going. No, I'm sorry, 8 projects currently going that'll extinguish that 2.3 we got last year. And then we're in the administration phase of the federal project. It's a completely different set of money, source of money.
I'm going to ask the question because I already know the answer of it, but if you were to receive the additional $3 million this year, would you be able to spend that money in the next fiscal year?
Absolutely. And we have to, and we really need to, because what the third phase of the federal grants that we're on is called a matching grant. And what we get from the feds is based off the state dollars that we spent or that we spend during that fiscal year. So
And how much do you get from the feds per dollar?
we expect in fiscal year 26 to get 2.5 million, roughly about 2.5 million.
Okay, so is it 75 cents on a dollar of the state, or how's it broken out?
We had to, so we roughly spent $422,000 a year in the last decade plugging wells. And so they use that average in a formula, in a federal formula, to kind of back down to what the feds are willing to give us.
Okay.
With the money from the feds, so y'all use that as a draw for them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they award it to us and contractor invoices us, and it immediately, the DOI, Department of the Interior, has been surprisingly quick in turning around our invoices for us.
Okay, LBR has you at 3 million for their federal funds. And what you're asking for, the federal funds that you would get from the match program, is that included in this 3 million?
So I think in that recommendation there was a little bit of confusion. That our intent was for that $3 million to be a state appropriation for the emergency plugging fund, not federal funds.
That's what we were talking about. We were talking about before, right? So, but you got that, meaning this goes back to here? Okay.
That federal line should, what we're asking for is that federal line to say 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Do you have anything? Jess, always good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you all
it.
very much. If you need anything, let me know.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with the Soil Water Conservation Commission. I'm sorry, what was your name?
I'm Nick Ivy.
Nick?
Director.
Hey, very nice to meet you. Scott Delano.
Pleasure to meet you all too. Thank you for having me today.
We'll go ahead and turn it over to you to hear your budget report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'll just go over a few things that are really important that our agency does. We have 2 statutory programs. That is district assistance to the 82 soil and water conservation districts throughout the state that we work with, and we're in the Mississippi Code to provide that assistance. and as well as surface mining program that we work with between the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the federal agency, and the Department of Environmental Quality, so that when surface mines are opened or closed within the state, that we ensure that those natural resources are preserved there. So the 9 general fund positions that we have support those activities. We also have some special fund programs. Our water quality program, which we receive funds through the Department of Environmental Quality. There are a number of impaired watersheds throughout the state of Mississippi on the 303D list of impaired watersheds. And so we use their federal money to work on their agricultural portion of their reclamation plans and that kind of thing. We also have the watershed rehab program, and the watershed operations program, which has gotten very big in the last few years with the influx of federal money. We were able to go out over the last 2 or 3 years and get some grants and contracts through the federal government for about $275 million, which is a big need throughout the state. The watershed rehab program is only for federally built watershed dams throughout the state. There are 600 watershed dams throughout the state. We have some of the largest numbers in the country, but those dams provide flood assistance downstream of a lot of different areas. They were built by the federal government in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. With local sponsors needing to provide any upgrades and that kind of thing. So what we've done is use federal funds to their program to try to rehabilitate those dams in order to allow them to last another 50 to 100 years. They've met their 50-year lifespan now. They're actually over that in a lot of cases. And so they're still good in a lot of cases, but there's rehab that has to be done. A lot of it is because they've been upgraded to high hazard through the Department of Environmental Quality, and that has happened because of people building in the inundation zones over the years. People have built houses, homes, churches, businesses, and things like that weren't there. These were built in the very rural areas at one time, which, as you know, are not rural anymore. So we're trying to rehabilitate those dams. We have 13 on our list right now to rehabilitate. And so we're working to get through the environmental portion and the planning portion of those. We have submitted those to the federal government, and we'll be working to get design and construction done within the next 2.5 years. So we do use, we've had bond funds through the legislature in the past. We currently have some bond funds that we use to provide the local match that is required for those dams. Because these drainage districts that are technically over these dams have very little or no funding. So they don't have the capacity to provide that match. The operations, and you'll see on the, let's see here, what page? You can see the current dams that we're rehabilitating there. The watershed operations program, that program is for flood control projects. And so the bipartisan infrastructure law that came about a few years ago provided us the ability to get some contracts throughout the state to try to help these mostly counties and municipalities that have major flooding issues. We are seeing rain come fast and shorter duration. So more rain in a shorter period of time. You can call it what you want, but I can tell you that it's happening. And our infrastructure, just like roads and bridges, the dam infrastructure that we have in the state was not built to deal with that kind of rain in that short of a time. So these watershed operations programs are mostly for things other than dams that are causing flooding or could prevent flooding. So you can see a long list of those throughout the state that we're using federal funds to work on those. One thing that I guess in my summary that I'll tell you is that so we get these contracts, the federal government provides through those 2 operations and rehab programs, they provide 100% of the construction cost. It's the best money that we can get, it's 100%. We do sign on, but because of these federal projects, there are quite a few things that are not construction that we work through our commission to get those things done. And our 6 or 7 of our staff at the commission work, their general fund positions that work to get that portion. It's really our match on these federal funds. They work to get those, it's really outreach and education, but it is a requirement of the federal government to put these funds on the ground. So we are using our general fund positions to provide match, for this vast amount of projects. And, I'm just going to be honest with you, we are overloaded. We have maxed out our small staff. I can't ask to do it. They're working all the time to get these things done. I'm not asking for more pins, but I have got people that I've taken in over the last couple of years as new folks and have trained them up, and they're doing a great job. So there's several of those. There's about $37,000, I believe, or $34,700 in general funds that is what we pay those positions out of, that I'm asking for money to give increases. I cannot, I just lost another one December the 31st, but we have a hard time, as you know, all state government does, trying to keep these employees around when the industry is just paying quite a bit more than what we can. And I understand that, but it is very important, I guess, for our agency at this time. If you look at our budget, our general fund budget over probably the last 10 years, I think 10 or 15 years ago, we were close to $1 million. Cost has gone up significantly. We have tried to run it like a business in that we try to be as lean as we can. But I can't find any other way to be any leaner than we are. So I guess I'm just pleading with you to make sure that we can still provide those services. What we do with our money is not a big part of conservation in the state, but the money that we bring in from other agencies to put conservation on the ground is huge for a small agency like us. And we just cannot afford to take a general fund cut at this point. If we do, we'll have to send somebody home and just lower our services. So we really don't want to do that. It looks like just crude numbers that for every dollar that we get in general funds, we're putting $100 back on the ground in conservation. I feel like that's a good number. I don't think many agencies could probably say that. So, but most of this assistance, other than the operations that provide flood control and the dams, the other things that we do provide assistance to the agricultural producers of this state. And even some of those agricultural producers may not appreciate what we do, but until their soil leaves in the creek down the way, and they don't have anywhere to plant it. So it's just very important that we continue to put the services out that we've been tasked with. I don't have a lot of other comments. I can go into a lot of detail about these programs and all that, but I know that you guys are very busy. If there's any questions that I can answer for y'all, I'll be happy to do that.
Well, I'll tell you, it's my first year having this budget.
Right.
So I'm not as familiar with it as I would want to be,
Right.
To be able to answer or ask the questions that I think would be necessary, especially if the chairman asks me questions.
Right.
But let me go and ask you this. You have other special funds as a source of funds for you. Where do those other special funds come from?
They are, the other special funds are indirect charges that we get on the federal funds that come in. So.
Okay.
That makes sense. So in other words, on a federal project, we're able to charge some of our employees' time to that. Yes, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, for the most part, will pay for the assigned tasks in our contract for some employees, but it does not include the education and information portion that I was talking about before. And that's what those general fund positions, that's why we need those, because they're the only source that we have to provide those services.
I don't know if you're the right person to ask of this, but I've handled MEMA's budget for a number of years, and there has always been some discussions about dams. And over the last 3 or 4 years, it seems like I have more of my colleagues that have asked about dams. And then I hear from DEQ, and we talk about dams. Everybody's talking about dams. There's a lot of dollars or and/or resources, including some federal funds. Wasn't it through the military, Department of Military, that where they had the ability to go and do some repairs or do something on
We gave them
dams?
funds for dams.
Is that what it was? The point is that I want to work with you a little bit more, understand a little bit more about, these are all federal dams, or maybe, is that the proper terminology, or
Right, so-
public dams?
Well, yes,
not
sir.
private?
These are on private land, but there are easements. They were built through public law 536 and 534 and 566 and 534, but basically the same program through the federal government. And it was to catch sediment. A lot of these dams are on the foothills of the Mississippi Delta, as well as up in the northeast part of the state, but we do have some in the southern part of the state as well. But they act in two ways. Number one is off of agricultural land, all the sediment that comes off of those lands piles up in those lakes and doesn't continue on down the stream, as well as the flood control that they provide when we get big rains and that kind of thing. But the dams that through our, if you look at our state watershed rehab program, and I can give you some information on that if you'd like me to, but it only allows us to work on federal dams. And so those are the dams that we work on. I know we work with Willie McKercher a lot with DEQ. They have a vast number of dams that need working on. We only deal with the federal ones currently because it's the only thing we have funding
All right,
for.
I want to get my head wrapped around that. Now's not the time to do that, but
Yeah.
some of your other programs, I'll dig into it a little bit more. And you have a card?
I did not bring one. I apologize.
These guys know how to get in touch with you. I'll get
Absolutely.
in touch with you at a later time. Do you have any other, you have a question?
We gave, I think, $62,000 for river gauges.
Yes.
Have y'all expended all that money?
Yes,
physical
well,
year?
we haven't expended it all, but we're about to pay the last, but we broke it up into A1 and A2, so they are installed. They are working currently on the rivers. And so the USGS is the ones that are taking in the data. They put the gauges out and all that. We did this through them. So, but they will be, hopefully by June or July, we'll have enough data to start making some assumptions about what's going on with the river levels and things like that. So yes, and I apologize.
Y'all
I
have
appreciate it.
expended that $92,000.
Well, we have not technically, but it's just because we got to make the second payment to them. We were
Okay.
waiting until January 1st. We just split it into two
Yeah,
for our
I
budget,
just
but yes,
was wondering
they're
if it should be
technically
reappropriated or
expended.
not.
No, those
Okay.
were one-time funds. Now, if you give me $92,000, I can find a way to spend it. But we do believe that once we get some data, that was kind of a little bit of a seed money kind of project to see what's going on with the reservoir and the Pearl River and that kind of thing. And we do expect that once we get some data from those gauges, that we'll know more about how we can possibly do something to address the issues. And so, but it will not be in 26. It was going to take a year or so to actually get the data and kind of figure out where we're going with it. So we'll be coming back at another time to ask for those funds if we need them.
Okay. Another question on y'all's submitted budget request. Has it changed since submission? I just wanted to make sure.
No.
Okay.
This is the first year in about 4 years that it hasn't, but
Okay.
thank goodness most of our funds are federal and we can escalate those, through DFA. So, but as far as our general fund budget, the request has not changed.
And then what's the requested amount? Are you requesting salary increases and positions?
No, it's just salary increases. There's two. I have 2 environmental natural resource specialist positions that would go from a 1 to a 2 at the start step. 1 training specialist 2 that would progress to a 3, and then 1 other employee. I'm not sure. I didn't write that down. There's 1 other. I believe it's a natural resource specialist 3. But there are 3 employees that we currently have that I'm trying to figure out a way to keep them. these positions unfortunately are widespread through DEQ and MEMA and several of those agencies. And these bigger agencies are good at stealing our people after I get them well trained. So I'm trying to avoid that. What we do is kind of a niche, and it's really hard to that turnover kills, especially me, because we're such, I mean, I do the training myself, but it's very hard for turnover in our small agency. And so we're really trying to keep those people in-house and let them do their thing.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Who might this be?
This is McClendon.
Senator McClendon, go ahead with your question.
Has there been any kind of extra planning for those that are downriver of the Arcabella Dam with the threat of that thing possibility of blowing?
So there is not at the state level. The Corps, we work with the Corps of Engineers and Department of Environmental Quality a good bit, and they're doing quite a bit. But the current funds for those kind of things either comes through the Corps of Engineers or through some other agency. So to answer your question simply is we are not currently planning. We're seeing the effects as more water is coming down from there, but we are not currently planning. Most of these watershed lakes that we are discussing here that are kind of defunct or not working properly would provide that a good bit of control throughout the Delta region. But specifically for that, no, we are not planning currently.
So that's strictly federal, and federal tells us they have no money for it. So should we be looking at that on the state level? Because you're looking at Whitman County, Coahoma County, and parts of Tunica County that could be underwater.
Yes, I mean, there is definitely a need for flood control in those areas. We have just, through our agency, we rely on those federal funds. And so, and currently we've got, well, I'm not going to say more, but we've got so many projects going on right now that I don't know if we have capacity to do anything else at this point. But I guess that's the reason that there hasn't been an ask but typically what we're asking for from the legislature is either matching funds or funds that we already have construction from the federal government for. So if we had, we could certainly do, one of the things that would need to be done is an environmental assessment of those watersheds. And we do a lot of those through our contract, environmental engineers. So those, and they're not cheap, but they certainly should be some planning done to see how we can relieve that. I believe I don't know what y'all have heard, but I think the last I heard was that Arcabella may take 5 to 7 years to get repaired correctly. So that's a long time to be flooding in those areas. And we would certainly love to have funds to at least start the environmental assessment process of that.
And that's what I was getting at was because the last time the Corps talked to us in Hernando was they were saying anywhere from 7 to 10 years.
Right.
But I don't know if you could get maybe, Mr. Chairman, an approximate how much a study would cost for in case we have because that dam, it was at emergency level there at one time, as you know, and then it was drained, and now it's back to a real big issue. But thank you for what you do, sir.
Thank you.
All right. So to his question, this is something that I was going to ask before. In your presentation, if I heard you correctly, the federal government first came in and did a lot of these dams with the expectation that the locals would then pick up, or the state, whoever it may be, would pick up the maintenance of it afterwards. And now we're getting to the end of life and we're having failures or problems with some of these structures. How much money does the local county and or municipalities downstream pay for any of this?
So the way that this program was set up initially was that drainage districts are set up throughout the state. They should have been set up such that their millage, just like taxes in a municipality, would go up with the value of the property. But what they said was, we're going to give you the dollar number of 2 mills in 1965 or whenever it was built. And so, for instance, Tallahatchie County, one of the biggest ones with the biggest amount of lakes, they get $972 a year.
Wow.
And they have a board of commissioners, and those commissioners, and rightfully so, they spend that money to get their insurance for themselves because they're liable. And that's the funds that they can do. This is a problem that we're going to be trying to face. We have every drainage district in the state primarily has no funds or little or no funds. They have enough funds to pay their commissioners mileage to get to their meeting, their volunteers to get to their meetings and back, and that's about it. So we have got a major problem with that. It was not, it just, I think in 1960s, everybody thought it was great. And there's a lot of, they've run out of money to do the operations and maintenance on these. And so it's just a big problem all around the state, 600 dams.
So, and I'm sure, well, okay, you said that there has not been any environmental done on that particular dam, correct?
On Arcabutla?
On Arcabutla.
And we have not done it. I'm sure that the Corps of Engineers has done that. They would have had to do that, and I can find that information out for you, but I'm sure that it has been done.
So what soft cost or what additional cost would have to be incurred prior to funding a project for construction or reconstruction?
So Arcabutla, I mean, that is a huge lake, and you have to look at where that water flows, but the Quitman County, some of Coahoma, Tunica County, there are some different watersheds are in different hooks, hydraulic units. And so you have bigger ones and smaller ones, but we would have to look at the map and see how big we need to go. But there'll be specific hydraulic unit codes that need to be assessed. Particularly, we'd look at where the flooding is happening and look at and kind of move out from there to try to get the smallest amount of work that can be done to relieve it.
I think what Senator McClendon was asking for was what would be the next step and what would we need to do to move it closer towards construction, or at least closer towards the utilization of funds that became available to go right towards construction, to try to reduce that 5 to 7 year construction period that you were afraid of earlier.
We like I said, we work on federal projects most of the time. The federal process is much more complicated when you're spending federal dollars. They require NEPA documents, the National Environmental Policy Act. And so we have to do a lot of millions of dollars worth of planning on that end. When you're not using federal funds, if we were using state funds, much like ARPA was done, there's a lot less planning that has to be done. Now, there's still a good bit of planning. It takes us about $2 million on a general, just if I'm just going to use an example, but a general size watershed, I would say, is about $2 million to do that NEPA document and get it ready for planning or for design and construction. So I because I haven't done one without federal funds, I would have to look at that, but it's something that we could get to you very quickly.
Is your federal coordination through the Army Corps of Engineers?
So we have to get permits from them, but all of our work is currently done through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. Right, and we've got those people with the Corps. We talk to them all the time, but we just don't have any. They don't supply us any money to do anything, and we don't supply them any. So we just kind of talk about it at this point. But I know that the constituents in those areas, we get calls all the time, what are we going to do? And so I did not realize there were no funds available on the federal level. A lot of times we see things happening around the state that someone else, FEMA or MEMA or somebody is handling, but we currently don't have any funds. So I would love to have, if we could get an estimate to you. I think the next step would be, if it's for us to get the money to do the initial assessment. And then that is a big, the only thing is, I think you would want us to access federal funds if we could.
Yeah,
So I would
absolutely.
suggest that we would go on those numbers as a federal project on the assessment portion of it, so that if they did come about, that we're not going back and reworking or double working on the same project.
If we could at least just get the two agencies talking and in agreement, that would be a huge step right there.
Right.
And start asking those questions. Where will they come from? What is our next step? And if we could the public, if we could give them what is our next step, would be great. So
Right.
thank you again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank y'all.
I would agree. Again, I'm from South Mississippi. I'm from Biloxi. We don't have need for dams. It just runs off into the Mississippi Sound.
We actually have a
Back
few.
back.
I can come down there
I
and
know.
show you some.
I know.
Marion County
Familiar.
area,
I'm
but-
familiar. But I will tell you that in my time in the legislature, I've always felt like there was a whole bunch of not knowing who to talk to when it comes to dams.
Right.
And there's always discussions about that. And I'd love to help you and figure out a way to coordinate that a little bit better to help with our residents in those areas, those impacted areas.
Right.
To further minimize risk going forward.
Right.
I am concerned about that millage. That's
Yeah, it's inadequate to say the least, but I think there are some options. I've seen some presentations and some ideas from around the state. Some pretty good ideas on how to fix it, but it would take some legislation to make it happen.
well, I'm all yours.
Thank you.
So I appreciate your time today.
Appreciate
Thank you
y'all.
very much.